Thank you so much, Andreas. You promised me a dance. Where did the dance go? An Austrian waltz it was. This is to honor my Alaskan friends who have traveled all the way from Alaska to this conference. This is bought in a church in Nome some years ago. It won the first prize for some handicraft exhibition, and it's made from beaver. So that's for you, Alaskan friends. It's always an honor for me to introduce you to the Arctic Ambassador panel here in Bodø in High North Dialogue. For obvious reason, this year it's not a full panel. It's not all the Arctic states that is represented, but we have among some of the most important panelists and ambassadors with us. So I just want you to join me while I give a presentation. Sharon, you may be first. Sharon Hudson-Dean, whom is the charge d'affaires from the U.S. Embassy to Norway. Welcome to you, Sharon.
Thank you.
We meet occasionally.
Great to be here.
We have from Sweden, Cecilia Björner. Welcome back, Cecilia. You was with us last year as well. And then we have one of the main and important players through the crisis we are going through now, Nicolas de la Grandville, European Union Ambassador. And I should have started with the Norwegian State Secretary, but he was sick. But I'm very pleased to Birgitte Hygen, who is the head of the High North Division or Secretariat in the Foreign Ministry of Norway. So please welcome. You rushed to the flight this morning to join us. So here we are again, in a very special situation, and I think more important than ever to have this kind of dialogue among the Arctic states. I'm going to start with it. We are not going. I said to you, we don't want any speeches. We want a dialogue in between you. And I'll start maybe with the question I got most of the time. I've been traveling along the Russian border from Kirkenes, Norway, down Finland, following the Russian border and talking to what I call the border people the last few weeks. That's a part of something we in High North News call the High North Tour. And the question I get all the time from everybody is, and to make it more academic, Arctic is defined as a peaceful part of the world. Will it still be a peaceful part of the world? And maybe you start, Sharon, since you are staying closest to me.
Very good. Thank you very much, Arne. We very highly value, as the United States, having peace and stability in the Arctic. It is a primary concern and interest for the United States that it remains that way, and for that reason we spend a lot of time and invest a lot of resources into the dialogues, the organizations, and the joint projects to keep it peaceful. We fully intend to continue with that, recognizing at the same time we are under extraordinary circumstances at the moment. Vladimir Putin has chosen to start a horrific, brutal war in Europe. We are recognizing that, and as we said prior to the invasion, there are extreme consequences, which we have implemented and continue to expand. We will not legitimize this war by going back to business as usual. We will support Ukraine. We want the Arctic to remain peaceful and are talking to all of our allies and partners about how we can do that and move forward.
So that is on your agenda, just to focus on to keep it a safe place. Is that what you're saying?
Most definitely.
How is the discussion going in the foreign ministry?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Sharon is saying. And one of our main priorities, of course, I mean, our location next to Russia means that our domestic policy and our foreign policy is very much shaped around the fact that we share this border. So maintaining peace and stability and also cooperation in the Arctic has always been one of the most important policy pillars for us. And some of the challenges that we're facing together in the Arctic doesn't go away, even if we have this very disturbing situation. So we need to continue as much as we can one sort of cooperation in the Arctic when it comes to climate change and maintaining the resources and the biological situation that we have in the Arctic. So we need somehow to find a way moving forward.
Even if you don't have the dialogue you are used to have between East and West in the Arctic, you still have a hope for a peaceful region.
Yeah, well, we have to hope for that.
Looking from Brussels, you are also in all your strategic documents talking about the peaceful Arctic and the special region where it's always have been peace. How do you look at that now?
Well, thank you. It's great to be back again and in Bodø and to have this dialogue in life. Europe is and has been a peaceful and a peace project. Peace between the European member states, between the EU member states and neighbors with the rest of the world. So we are particularly attached and considering both reestablishing peace in Ukraine by the two-tracks approach we have had on many issues, both the sanctions, the isolation measures. We have today, in a few hours, a very important vote at the United Nations to suspend Russia's participation from the Human Rights Council, because we see it as a blatant contradiction in terms between participation in the human rights and carrying out the horrors that we have seen and we may discover further in other parts of Ukraine. And at the same moment, we want peace in our close neighborhood, in the neighborhoods of our friends, partners and allies in Norway. That means in the Arctic, as well as, of course, the other Arctic countries, powers, we have good relations with. So in the ideal world, we would like peace everywhere, and including in the Arctic. I think you have to both prepare for all possibility. That's a very important character we saw here in Bodø. That's security and preparedness. And on the other hand, keeping the dialogue we have, the specificity of the Arctic and Northern dialogue, because of neighborhood, because of subjects that are also important that have to be treated at a micro level or at a regional level or at a local level, and that we also think that should be continued to be treated by dialogue and not by severing all links and by re-establishing borders. We will not be the ones who re-establish border walls and differences between the states and countries and peoples.
Yeah, I know. And we are not going to discuss the sanction at all. This is not a part of the discussion here. But I have to ask you, when you say we will, isn't that a contradiction to keep peace and excluding the dialogue between East and West? Doesn't it make it very difficult to keep it peaceful? Now,
if it's for me again, well, I don't think that we interrupt totally the dialogue. There are certain fora are suspended, or Russia's participation in certain fora is suspended. You still have 7 out of the 8 members, and we are not a member. We are merely an observer. So it's who are we to on behalf of the EU to say something about it? But I think it was the right decision to take, because you have to mark, you have to give to show the difference. Now you could go back to 2014, 2008. What have we done wrong by that time? What should we have done to prevent what happened on the 24th of February? So this is, but now it's history, and those who are in charge of writing history will be the ones who write about it. But we have to think about the future and to decide and to find the best balanced way. We have to keep some channels open. I think it's also at President Zelensky's and the legitimate, democratically elected authorities of Ukraine to at their request that it is done. And at the other hand, we have sanctions. We have been adopting, or we are in the process of adopting, I think, the 5th sanctions package. The United States have just been adopting a new package. So we are continuing to raise the pressure on the Russian regime on this.
And we will, of course, get back to a discussion about the Arctic Council and the future and how to go further on. But before that, I go to you, Cecilia. Here is still hope for a peaceful region. Is that the way you see yourself?
I will state the obvious as well as my colleague here, that of course we have to believe that there is a hope, and we have to work towards keeping the peace in the region. But, you know, it hasn't been for free. I think we should, I think we are and we should be proud of the piece of political and diplomatic handicraft that we have used and the peace we have obtained. We have worked hard to build institutions, to continue dialogue, to craft it very well, to form this peace in the North. So that is something to be proud of, and I think we have to continue on that path and continue to work on it. But having said that, it is under extreme threat. I mean, the tension is, of course, increasing, and the prospects are you don't even want to think about the worst scenarios. But, and we have to also be realistic and see that Norway, Sweden, Finland partly also increases the defense, the budgets. So in the way of being, that is also, from our perspectives, you all know that that is also a step of peace, to build your defense in a way that it should be a higher risk for anybody to attack and do things that would make the peace suffer. But still, we are protecting ourselves at the same time. So that is, you know, measures taken that show a realistic idea of that we can and we should create peace also for the future.
One of the main effects of the situation we are in are the support for the international organization. And when I travel around in Sweden and Finland, it's obvious, and everybody knows that the support for NATO has increased both in Finland and Sweden, and you see a starting debate in Norway and the European Union. We haven't had that since '94 or something. And it's really growing in Sweden. Could you predict, tell us why is it growing, and will it end up in a membership? Could I ask you about that? I know you don't have the answer, but if you can give some...
No, but I'm happy to elaborate a little bit on that, because it's the most important question I get all the time, and I know it's a big interest, and it's not that digital and easy answer, so it will take a little bit of time. You can see that, you know, with this, I mean, we have, as you said, Nicolas, been in a sort of low-tension war for a long time, with both Ossetia in Georgia, and then in Ukraine, eastern part of Ukraine, and now the full-fledged invasion and full war. The architecture of security is totally rewritten. It would be strange, stupid, and not responsible not to rethink how you should answer to that for a country like Sweden. So I think everybody approved to that, as it is in Finland. So that's one part of the puzzle. The other thing is that for the first time, I think the Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Støre was in Sweden on Tuesday, and he's put it very well, because he said, you know, in Norway, it was a real political problem when we joined NATO. For Sweden, it's existential. We haven't had war for 200 years. We brought up a bit like a religion, believing in neutrality and then non-alignment. So this is an enormous convulsion, can you say so, in the Swedish society. And it takes time, but for the first time, Sweden has woken up and see that if you're not a member of NATO, you can't rely on a security option. So I think it's the first time that Swedes in general see it. In Finland, that is not the case. Finland has a totally different realistic position. That means that there are a little bit different processes in Sweden and Finland. Finland opinions have raised quickly and very high. Sweden has gone step by step, and I think it's about closer to 60% now that says yes. And those who say no has shrunk. That means that it is also another realistic situation for the politicians in the parliament to take into account. And there is a movement. It's a movement in the way that the far-right party has said that we probably also would like to go join the NATO, which means that you have a majority in the parliament. However, the tradition in Sweden is that you should have a broader majority to make such an important change.
But what could change that maybe? Or when I look at the last figures.
But I'm just coming to that. The Social Democrats are the most important part in this puzzle, because if they change so that you start to see a majority also in the Social Democrats, then it would be easier for the Prime Minister to make this existential, fundamental, very painful change in the Social Democratic Party. And we are, day by day, discussing with the Finns, knowing exactly what's happening in both countries. There is an extremely long tradition that we should do this together. So my prediction is that in one way or another, if it happens, we should do it together. And it also shows very clearly in the opposition, in the opinion polls in Sweden, that Swedes are very much more interested in joining NATO if the Finns do that.
Yeah,
so
that's
if
right.
the Finns does it, and they show that they are ready to do it, that will also have a very good influence, or good in the sense that there will be more positive opinions in Sweden.
That's right, because the last few polls says that if the Finnish are going into NATO, there is only some 15-18% of the Swedish that oppose it. That means a total change of the situation in the north. I mean, there is Sweden and Finland, between Russia and Norway and the rest of Europe, this will make a big change. Is anybody, I know you are not politicians, but I mean, you think about it. How could that change, again, the peaceful situation in the north if it's two NATO countries that is close to the border of Russia? What will that do to the military expansion in the high north?
Well, if I might make a few points that I think have to be repeated, and we say this frequently but cannot say it often enough. NATO is a defensive alliance. It was founded in that way largely because we agreed you can't take peace for granted. And so it's a defensive alliance, and it is based very much on transparency and predictability. And so when we do exercises, when we talk about budgets, when we do a lot of our strategy work, a lot of that is shared because we are a defensive alliance and take our commitments very seriously. The United States is 100% committed to Article 5 of the treaty, which says if one ally is attacked, we're all attacked, and we come to their defense. And for that reason, we want the peace to be maintained, we want everything to be predictable, and have worked to set up channels of communication, which I think is very important, on military exercises and other elements of that nature. And so for that reason, I think NATO is a positive contributor to peace, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you, of course. The description, that's the description we use on ourselves. But that depends on the rationality on the other side.
Sorry, you wanted to say something? No, I only wanted to react to that.
Birgitte?
No, I just want to say that, you know, any country's affiliation is totally up to themselves. Whether we will eventually look at the EU membership one day, I don't know. But what's absolutely certain is that we have a great cooperation between the Nordic countries as it is. You know, they're cooperating. I mean, we're founding one of the founding members of NATO. We sort of have a specific role in the north. We train with our allies in the north. Sweden and Finland has been very closely interlinked into those exercises. And we also have the NORDEFCO, the defense cooperation in the sort of between the Nordic countries. That's been very important. And of course, we have our EA agreement, which means that we're very closely interlinked with what's going on in Europe. So despite that we have different kind of versions of joining each other's alliances, we are very interlinked and we cooperate on these very important matters.
Nicolas?
Thank you. I just wanted to say on a very personal basis, because it's not up to the EU representative to comment on NATO, but if we come back 30 years ago in the summer of 1990, we had a total mental change in NATO saying we are no longer opponents. We stretch our hand to the, by the time, Eastern Bloc, because it still existed by the time. So we should also think of all the steps that NATO has done towards Russia and towards the East in the 90s, and that it should give a light also on the arguments we hear on the other side, saying that it's the expansion of NATO that was perceived as allowing Russia to do what their leaders have been doing through the years 2000. So there has been a time of very good relationship between NATO and Russia, and it could have been a very constructive way. Now, back on the two other issues, there are indeed, as it has been said, very different choices by, let's say, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, and even Denmark, on the belonging to NATO and to the EU, and I would add to the Euro. This is something that we on EU side highly respect, because it has been a choice by the people. It's a matter of sovereignty, it's a matter of national sovereignty. So this, if discussed, if decided in another way, if thinking change, then the institutions, in particular the EU, would adapt to it. It's something that is really in the hand of the people. And nevertheless, we have a very good cooperation. The EU and Norway have, according to the current agreements, status of relations, a very good, fruitful, useful, and I think mutually beneficial relation. And this is the same for security and defense issues that are also raising inside the EU. We have had the heads of state and government decided 2, 3 weeks ago in Versailles about the strategic compass. That is a new concept of how to help the EU to become also a security actor and power in the world, and not only in matter of politics and economy and trade. And going beyond the values, but giving a bit of teeth to the whole thing. And this, of course, is not in contradiction. There has been also a long debate. This is not in contradiction with NATO. NATO will not always intervene, and the EU will have their own needs, projects, operations, and so to conclude, it's a matter of cooperation, not always of status.
Is it possible, Cecilia, to say something about the timeline for a possible membership for Sweden and maybe also for Finland?
I cannot speak on behalf of Finland, but there is one thing that I've heard Michael said, the Finnish ambassador say often, and that I also echo, and that is there are processes going on in each country. They are, in principle, doing the same thing. They are evaluating the various options that exist and see pros and cons and making an analysis and then having a discussion among politicians in parliament or, as in Sweden, in a working group. The information I have is that the processes are quite parallel and will be finished sometime in month of May. So after that, both of the countries should, as far as I understand it, also discuss then internally if there would be a change in their choice. But I want to underline, as Michael always said, it's a totally democratic processes. And I strictly believe that there is no decision yet taken by the leaders of the countries. So I think there is the processes themselves. That's also the tradition of the Nordic way of doing it, as in Norway. You know, the process in itself will also sort of single out the various options and possibilities and going forward. So I can't say more than that.
In Finland, they say that because of the polls that give such a support, they don't need a referendum to take the decision.
And that is the same in Sweden. The Swedish Prime Minister was asked that, and she said that not all important decisions need a referendum.
I don't know if I could ask you, Sharon, but I try. Would there be any discussion within NATO, you think, if they got an application from Sweden and Finland?
Believe there are ongoing considerations that for sure our position is the door is open and that when the time comes it would be considered very seriously. Sweden and Finland are great partners for NATO at the moment, and there's a lot of good discussions and information sharing and activities, etc. So there's already a wonderful foundation of working with those two countries.
I mean, you have been an ambassador to Latvia, I know the Baltic states, but you still think there's an agreement among the NATO states that Finland and Sweden is welcome?
The door to submitting an application is definitely open.
Yeah,
that is absolutely sure.
Okay, that's a diplomatic answer.
Yes. I'm not here representing our mission to NATO.
That's what I said. Yes. You probably can't answer it, but it seems like you're right. Let's move a little bit on to Arctic Council, which used to be the last forum where East and West really met and had a dialogue that is on two planes. There's a political body and there's a scientific body. And not so far in the future, Norway is going to take over the chairmanship in Arctic Council. And we know there's only 7 or 8 cooperating. How is that? I know you have been planning for the transformation to Norway for many years. What is your strategy now in Norway?
A very good question. Of course, we need to maintain the belief that we can take over the chairmanship in April, May next year. And at the moment, all the activities within the council has been put on a temporary hold. In the meantime, we are now trying to figure out what would be the best way forward, because we've been working so hard to establish these organizations and the structures and the legal framework in the Arctic for so many years has served all the Arctic nations very well. And this is a geographical cooperation because we are located where we are. We have the same sort of challenges and opportunities in the Arctic, really. So we have to make sure that we don't throw everything away in this circumstance. But the question is, how do we do that? And how do we preserve some of the structures with the sort of long-term aim of someday, we have to hope that Russia is there, that they can come back to joining some of the activities. But at the moment, it's not business as usual. As I say, it's on hold, and we'll have to see how we move forward. But hopefully we can take over the chairmanship next year as planned, and that's our ambition.
Okay. Nicolas, I mean, you said you are an observer.
We are de facto an observer, yes.
Yeah, de facto, but in real life you are a member of Arctic Council for all its worth. What do you see kind of changes you have to do to take care of Arctic Council?
I think we have to keep, as usually, different tracks open. On the one hand, the institution as such, as business as usual, cannot work as business as usual because all members are not present, and for excellent reasons, and for very sad. But we have to draw the conclusions about that. And the political dimension has, to a certain extent, to prevail also on the scientific. I heard it's very sad, and we will miss a lot of data, a lot of knowledge, a lot of thinking from the other side of the border, from Russian scientists. But I think it's also putting them in danger to continue to have business as usual with them. So we also have to think of that. I'm a total layman in that, but I think you could get the data, the information, the thinking from other sources, and then we catch up when the day has come with the Russian scientists. But really, the political situation has to prevail. We cannot do as if nothing had happened. And we have to group amongst like-minded and to do the best out of it and to hopefully come back to a better future.
Did I understand you right when you said that you still can have cooperation with Russian scientists under the umbrella of Arctic Council?
Well, I'm sure everyone in the different ministries and so have clearing houses, and they think what can be done and what cannot be done. I would rather be on the side, but it's not my decision to say no.
But isn't that a part of the sanctions?
Well, basically, all the activities within the Arctic Council has now paused. So there's no activity as it is at the moment.
Not even between the scientists?
No, not in the project or working groups are all sort of put on hold for the time being.
And that is a lot of scientific work going on that will stop up now.
Yeah.
What is the American strategy to keep Arctic Council working?
We are perfectly in line with the other members, not including Russia, in terms of doing this temporary pause. There's been a lot of consideration put into what that means. It's very clearly sending a strong message to Russia. It is not business as usual. Your war in Ukraine and all of the killing of Ukrainians is completely unacceptable, and therefore we cannot move forward with business as usual. We do hope that the Arctic Council may, in the future, continue its work. Really, a lot of this is up to Vladimir Putin. He started this war.
I know, Sharon. I mean, we don't have, you keep repeating that
Yes.
it's because of Russia, and we're all aware of that. So I'm just trying to look into the crystal ball. How are you going to continue this work? There's no disagreement.
Right. It's a very fluid situation,
Yeah.
and it's a difficult time right now. And so we continue to speak with the members that we're all in alignment with, to consider these factors, to have conversations at places like this. Arctic Frontiers is coming up as well, and just to emphasize how incredibly close and beneficial the direct contact is, bilateral and other forums like that. And so we are talking about this and considering it.
And we're also talking to a lot of the scientists themselves, because they're the ones who can actually say, we've had data sets from the 50s, and if we stop doing that, what's going to happen? And also, what's going to happen to the seabirds, what's going to happen to this and that. So there are sort of environmental concerns that we have to think about when we do this pause. And so the assessment is, how long can we have this pause before we actually see some real damage out there? So all these considerations are now taking into account.
Yeah, because a lot of these scientists is about climate changes.
Sure.
And they don't last for long if you don't keep them updated.
Yeah.
So, but you say you consider, does that mean if you go to the European Union that the sanction on scientists is something that is under not daily but under discussion? It may be changed?
Well, but a lot of this activity is not sanctioned. So we have to sort of differentiate what's under the sanctions regime and what's actually sort of on the scientific sort of scientist to scientist basis. But at the moment, this is all what we go through now and see where are the real dangers and see what we can do about it with or without. I mean, with or without the framework of the Arctic Council. So all these things we have to consider.
I'm not an historian, but I wonder, has there been any times in the history that scientific cooperation are being banned for political reasons? Anybody knows? Yeah, okay. But that it was for some, okay, under the apartheid. Okay. But even during the Second World War and the Cold War, we had cooperation on scientific issues on East and West. What is the Swedish hope for surviving Arctic Council?
I mean, it's a especially complicated situation this year because Russia is also having the chairmanship. Then it will be, the next challenge will be for the next chairman. And I think we are, I honestly don't think we have positions. We don't know. We're all searching. We will sort of support you, but you have the difficult next position to make some decisions there. My discussions with my minister at home is that we're middle of the war still. We still, it's extremely difficult to right now see where we're going and how we're going to do it. And I mean, we can't foresee that it's possible to defreeze this year, I think. So we have this time also to see how we should work it out. So I have the most laid back answer because we don't know. It's still in shock in a sense. So you know, it's not any clear analysis or strategies or anything. I think that's a fair answer.
Thank you. I mean, all this, I agree with the colleagues, of course. We've been thinking and deciding while walking. All this crisis has shown also that the features we marked yesterday as important, being relying on wisdom and on initiative, on being creative, are very important. So we speak together, we discuss, and in the end, we act quite quickly, because for institutions that were accused of being slow, cut from reality, undemocratic, etc., I think that we've been forced to go quite a long way into sanctions, but also showing a lot of cohesion, unity, solidarity, capability of respect and dialogue inside our like-minded countries, governments, and people.
Just a little add there from my side, and that is that Sweden will always promote that we keep the institutional infrastructure, because that could sometime in the future, it's a gem. I think Arctic Council is a gem, and so that it should be kept in one way or another. It's the question is how and when and what should we fill it with?
Among Arctic people, some of them are afraid for the war, and side effect of the war among Arctic people are the lack of supply of goods, of food, because we have to import everything. It's energy. How prepared are the Arctic, northern part of the Arctic states for a situation like this? How is it about Alaska?
I'll do my best, although we have a representative from the great state of Alaska here. There's a lot that's happening at the moment in order to focus resources and assistance on Alaska. And so one really big example is President Biden's Infrastructure and Jobs Act that was just passed, once-in-a-generation legislation with a lot of funding over many years, of which I believe Alaska will get nearly $5 billion over 5 years to invest in infrastructure, internet, electrical vehicle charging stations, indigenous community development, air connections, a whole lot of infrastructure going into the state to assist with the development and the security, long-term economic and other security of those communities out there. So that's one element of what we are doing. In addition to that, we are in the process right now of updating our national Arctic strategy. President Obama wrote the first US Arctic strategy in 2013. President Biden is going through a process of revising it. This is from what we would call a big tent point of view, meaning many different US government agencies and departments contributing to this. What are our interests in the Arctic? How do we ensure that those are protected and maintained? It's being done based on existing norms and the rules that are out there and working with our allies and partners. So we anticipate that strategy coming out in the future, which will look to these questions to support it.
Besides spending a lot of money on money on the military, Cecilia, what kind of preparedness are going on in Sweden to meet the situation?
I mean, basically, I think that the question of storage, and being gathering together a lot of, from various point of view of food and everything, that is not on top of the agenda in the discussions in Sweden. And I think two things. I mean, we have already strategies working on all these things, as you will explain your strategy. So that is going to go on and make sure of stability and continue all the tracks that we're doing already. The other thing is that Sweden is such a firm believer in free trade, and we turn out because we still believe that we will be able to, together within the EU, not least, to be able to find good solutions for storage. I'm not saying that we don't mind at all and that we are blue-eyed. I just want to say that if I compare with Norway and also what I see in Finland, it's a little bit lower tension about this question in Sweden.
Let's hear from Norway if you can say something briefly.
Yeah, well, so some of the sort of sad side effects of the situation, of course, is the potential for both food shortages and energy supply. And this has, of course, raised prices that we can see quite clearly in this country and other places as well. And it has increased the political discussions around the necessity of being self-sufficient when it comes to food supply. But when it comes to the energy situation, we are, of course, one of the biggest suppliers of natural gas to Europe. And we just want to underline that we want to maintain a secure energy supply to Europe, also in the future. And we're working very hard to uphold the quantum that's needed.
How dependent are the European Union of Norwegian gas in this situation?
The European Union is dependent on Norwegian gas, but it's even more dependent on Russian gas for the moment. And the idea is to shift from that and to reduce strongly and as strongly as possible the dependency. That means relying and being grateful for relying on reliable partners as Norway, but also diversifying and buying some liquefied natural gas from where it's coming. I mean, President Biden and President von der Leyen, was it 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, were together in Brussels and discussed this and opened that path after it had been already envisaged a few years ago. From other sources we can get, we could try to get gas, and of course we do not renounce on the objective goal we have set, and that is very important. That is the Green Deal, meaning carbon neutrality by 2050 and reducing by 55 the carbon emissions by 2030. That means raising considerably the non-fossil fuels and sources of energy in as far as possible. And in practice, this has the idea is to reduce already strongly the dependence from Russia by the end of this year. So it's not in a too long a future. There are strong objectives as far as this is concerned. On food shortages, there has already been a program of 500 million euros to support the agriculture in Europe that would have negative consequences from the shortages coming from Russia and Ukraine, and of course as well solidarity to the outside, as we have always and frequently been doing, in order to support stabilizing prices in countries in greatest need or in greatest danger of hunger and shortages, and supplying as well as far as possible, and finding other sources.
Well, thank you very much. This is not a debate that is possible to conclude other things than we're taking step by step into the future. But thank you for keeping the dialogue open. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.